So, what if I told you that your absolute worst, most agonizing 3 in the morning panic attack isn't an emotional breakdown at all,
Right, yeah.
but like a literal software glitch? Today, we're taking a completely different approach to human psychology in this deep dive.
We really are. It's a total paradigm shift.
It is.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who has ever felt, hopelessly trapped in a spiral of anxiety or stuck in a life situation where literally every choice feels wrong, the source material we're looking at today offers an explanation that completely strips away the mystery of mental distress.
Yeah, it takes the mysticism right out of it.
Exactly. We are looking at a fascinating paper titled A Cybernetic Framing of Identity, Disturbance, and Recursive Instability. And it's written in the style of the really influential systems theorist, Gregory Bateson.
Right.
And it essentially argues that human identity isn't a soul or a personality or like a mystical cloud of emotions. It's a system. It is code.
Code. Yeah.
And sometimes that code just gets stuck in an infinite loop.
We really are shifting the entire paradigm with this one. Because to appreciate what this paper is doing, we first need to define what cybernetics actually means in this context.
Yeah, because it sounds like
Right.
we're talking about science fiction, right? Like robots or something.
Exactly. It sounds like sci-fi, but cybernetics is simply the science of communications and automatic control systems. It's really just the study of how systems regulate themselves through feedback.
Okay, so like a thermostat.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You can apply cybernetics to a thermostat in your house, to the engineering of a car engine, to an artificial intelligence program, and, as this paper argues, to the human mind.
Wow.
The mission of this deep dive is to look at those moments of profound personal crisis through this very mechanical lens. We want to understand that what often feels to you like a massive moral or personal failing is, well, structurally speaking, just a communicative error.
It changes the whole game, honestly. I mean, if you view a mental spiral as just bad code, it sort of removes the heavy judgmental weight we usually place on ourselves, right?
It absolutely does.
We aren't fundamentally broken people. We're just experiencing a failure in a feedback loop. But to understand how the mind breaks down in this mechanical way, we first have to understand what the mind, or specifically our sense of self, actually is under this cybernetic framework.
And the paper really comes out swinging on this front.
It really does. The core premise is that the self is not a noun. It is not a solid object hiding inside your chest. It's an emergent property. The text defines it as a pattern maintained within a system of relationships.
Right, because if you think about the traditional way we view identity, we usually treat the self as this isolated static essence.
Like you are you no matter what.
Exactly. You are you, regardless of where you are or who you're with. But this cybernetic framing rejects that entirely. It argues that the individual does not generate a stable self in isolation.
Right.
Instead, your identity is sustained completely through circuits of communication. You put out a signal, the environment responds, and you adjust.
So it's interactive.
Completely. It is the constant stream of responses, confirmations, and corrections from the outside world that actively creates and sustains the stability of who you think you are.
Okay, let's unpack this because it is a bit of a slippery concept.
It is, yeah.
The self isn't a solid statue carved out of marble that you just, carry around in a backpack. It is much more like a flock of birds flying in formation.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, like if you look at a massive flock of starlings making those incredible swooping shapes in the evening sky, the shape itself isn't a physical object. There's no invisible balloon holding all those birds together.
Right, there's no boundary.
Exactly. The formation only exists because every single bird is constantly adjusting its position based on the signals around it. They're reading the wind, the speed of the bird to their left, the visual cues of the bird above them.
And that is the feedback.
That's the feedback. And if the birds stop communicating and adjusting to those signals, the formation just scatters into random noise. The shape disappears.
That captures the dynamic perfectly
Mm.
because the pattern is absolutely real. I mean, you can see the shape in the sky,
Yeah.
but it requires continuous, reliable information to exist.
Yeah.
In human terms, if you tell a joke and your friend laughs, that is a circuit of confirmation. If you touch a hot stove and pull your hand away, that's a circuit of correction.
Right.
Your sense of you is just the ongoing compilation of millions of these tiny, consistent feedback loops. You are the emergent property of your own interactions.
Yeah.
So as long as the feedback is consistent, the pattern of your identity holds together.
Which is honestly a beautiful way to look at life when the weather is clear and the flock is flying smoothly, right?
Sure.
You feel stable. You know who you are. But if the self is just a pattern maintained by consistent signals, what happens when the wind starts blowing in two different directions at the exact same time?
That's the big question.
Yeah, like what happens when the feedback just stops making sense?
Well, this is where we locate the glitch. The paper makes a really profound point regarding system failure here. It says, systems do not fall into disorder simply because of a lack of information.
Oh, interesting.
They fall into disorder because of incoherent information.
Okay, incoherent.
Right. And the text uses a devastating concept to illustrate this, known as the double bind. A double bind occurs when a system receives contradictory signals simultaneously.
Right.
The classic sort of abstract example they give is receiving the message, be yourself, paired simultaneously with the message, do not be that self.
See, I am going to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Because on the surface, that just sounds like a frustrating conversation. I mean, humans have logic and reason. If someone gives me contradictory command like, be spontaneous.
Right, which is inherently a paradox.
Exactly, because if I obey you, I'm not being spontaneous. But I just roll my eyes. I recognize the contradiction, I ignore it, and I go about my day. I just don't see how a contradiction is enough to completely crash the human operating system.
Well, this raises an important question because you're assuming you have the freedom to just walk away from the input.
Oh, okay.
Right? A true double bind requires a very specific set of conditions to actually trap the mind. It isn't just a mild paradox from some stranger on the street. In a genuine double bind, the relationship is absolutely vital to the organism's survival or structural integrity.
Like what?
Think of a child relying entirely on a parent for physical and emotional survival. Or, an adult whose entire livelihood and career depends on a single authority figure.
Okay, put me in the shoes of that adult. Give me a real-world scenario where I'm trapped in a double bind at work and I can't just roll my eyes and leave.
Sure. Imagine you have a boss who holds the keys to your promotion and your financial security. They pull you into their office and demand that you show more initiative. They say, you need to take ownership, make executive decisions, and stop relying on me for direction.
Okay, sounds like standard boss stuff.
Right. So you take their advice. The very next day, you launch a new initiative without asking for permission.
Because that's what they told me to do.
Exactly. But the boss immediately reprimands you publicly, stating, you are not authorized to make these decisions without consulting me first.
Oh, man. That is infuriating.
It is, because you are now receiving two conflicting signals. Signal A, act independently. Signal B, never act independently. Furthermore, there is a third, implicit signal.
Which is?
You are not allowed to point out the contradiction, or you will be fired for insubordination.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I feel the trap now. If I step up, I am punished for overstepping. If I hang back and ask for permission, I'm punished for lacking initiative.
Exactly.
And I can't quit because I need the paycheck to feed my family. I mean, I can't exit the system, but I also cannot satisfy the conditions of the system. There's literally no correct move.
And because you cannot resolve the contradiction and you cannot escape it, your cognitive system begins to iterate.
Iterate, like repeat.
Yes. It searches for a solution using the only parameters it has. It runs the scenario over and over again in your head. Wait, maybe if I act independently but frame it as a question. No, that violates signal A. Maybe you have to ask for permission but phrase it as a statement. No, that violates signal B.
Oh, I've had those exact thought loops.
Right. You're desperately searching for a resolution that literally does not exist within the current parameters. Structurally, the paper defines this state as a loop without correction.
A loop without correction. Wow, that completely changes how I view the actual physical sensation of anxiety.
How so?
Well, when you're pacing the floor at midnight, agonizing over an impossible situation like that workplace dynamic, you subjectively feel like you're doing so much mental work.
You really do.
Your mind is racing, you're generating 100 thoughts a minute, you feel physically exhausted, but structurally, your brain thinks it's problem solving when it isn't exploring anything new at all.
It's not.
It's just re-entering its own cognitive pathways using the exact same logic that failed the first time. It is merely repeating the same constrained circuit.
It is repeating the circuit, but with increasing intensity. And this brings us to one of the most critical mechanical concepts in the paper. Once the system is stuck in this repeating loop without correction, the nature of the feedback changes.
Okay, how does it change?
It shifts from negative feedback to positive feedback. And we need to be very careful with these terms here, because in common language, positive means good and negative means bad.
Right.
But in cybernetics, they mean something entirely different.
Right, let's lay out the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
In cybernetics, negative feedback is the stabilizing force. It's the thermostat in your house.
Exactly.
If you set the thermostat to 70 degrees and the room heats up to 75, the system registers a deviation. It then introduces a negative correction. It kicks on the air conditioning to cool the room back down to 70. It opposes the change to return the system to equilibrium.
Spot on. And positive feedback does the exact opposite. Instead of opposing the deviation, positive feedback amplifies it.
It makes it bigger.
Right. It takes the output of the system and feeds it back in as input, escalating the signal with each and every cycle. So because the brain is trapped in the double bind, and there is no negative feedback available to correct the contradiction, amplification takes over.
Wow.
The system moves further and further away from equilibrium, increasing its own signal strength with every single pass.
The best analogy for this is live audio. It's exactly like taking a live microphone and holding it too close to a speaker.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
We've all been at a concert or a school assembly where this happens, right? The microphone picks up a tiny ambient sound and sends it to the speaker. The speaker broadcasts that sound slightly louder.
Right.
The microphone instantly picks up that louder sound, sends it back to the speaker, which plays it even louder. Within 3 seconds, it loops and amplifies until it creates this unbearable, deafening screech that makes everyone cover their ears. That is positive feedback. And this paper is arguing that the human brain does the exact same thing with cognitive loops.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
The thought loop acts as both the microphone and the speaker. The more you run the impossible scenario in your head, the louder the internal signal becomes.
Yeah.
And what's vital to understand is how you, as the organism, actually experience that deafening mental screech. To you, this systemic amplification is experienced as an intense, overwhelming sense of urgency.
Urgency. Man, that tight feeling in your chest.
Yeah.
That overwhelming conviction that you have to fix this problem, make a decision, or escape the situation right this very second, or the world is just going to end.
Because the mind misinterprets the volume of the signal. It assumes that because the urgency is so high, the stakes must be incredibly high. It feels like a breakthrough is just around the corner if you just think a little harder or, worry a little faster.
Right.
But the text provides an incredibly striking sentence to dismantle this illusion. It states, "Urgency is not evidence of truth. It is evidence of escalation."
Let me repeat that for anyone listening who might be in the middle of a stressful week. Urgency is not evidence of truth. It is evidence of escalation.
It's so powerful.
Think about how many times you've been in the middle of a mental spiral, and the sheer physical panic made you feel like what you were worrying about must be objectively, undeniably real and important.
Right.
Your brain convinces you that the threat is massive because the alarm bells are so loud, but it isn't truth. It's just the microphone getting too close to the speaker. It's just the structural reality of a system lacking correction. It's escalating purely because it has nowhere else to go.
The system is just doing what systems do when they lack negative feedback. But, the organism naturally cannot tolerate that level of instability forever.
No, you'd explode.
Right. In the middle of that deafening mental screech, you desperately want to find an answer to make it stop. You want to grab any solution just to break the tension. However, the source material warns us that the answer you find while you are in this escalated state is almost always a trap.
Wait, why is it a trap? If I finally make a decision and the anxiety goes away, hasn't the system corrected itself?
We have to look at where the decision is actually coming from. While you're trapped in the double bind, the system is starved of new information. It cannot access anything outside the loop.
Okay.
So what does a system do when it needs an output but has absolutely no new input? It recruits what it already has. It preferentially activates previously reinforced pathways. It relies on the thoughts, the defensive habits, and the behavioral patterns that have been strengthened through repetition over your entire lifetime.
So when I'm panicking about my boss, my brain doesn't invent some novel, highly diplomatic solution. It brings up my oldest insecurities.
Exactly.
It resorts to my most practiced defense mechanisms, like aggressive confrontation or total avoidance.
Precisely. Those deep-seated pathways define the only available interpretations and responses when a system is under extreme stress. Subjectively, you might feel like you're carefully weighing multiple possibilities.
Right, you sit there thinking, should I confront my boss? Should I quit? Should I send a passive-aggressive email?
But structurally, those aren't genuine choices. They are all just constrained outputs generated by the same broken loop. To quote the source text again, "The appearance of multiplicity is not freedom. It is the repetition of dominance."
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the appearance of multiplicity is not freedom. That is incredibly dark, but it makes so much sense. It challenges those moments we all have, those sudden moments of 3 a.m. clarity.
Oh, yes.
You know exactly what I mean. You're lying awake, stressing over a massive life problem, the microphone in your brain is just screeching, and suddenly, at 3:14 a.m., you make a drastic decision.
You figured it out.
Right. You say, that's it, I'm quitting my job tomorrow and moving to a cabin, or I'm ending this relationship right now via text. You feel this immense rush of resolve and the anxiety momentarily drops. Are you saying that 3 a.m. clarity is totally fake?
What's fascinating here is, based on the cybernetic framing in the text, yes, those moments of supposed clarity are almost entirely illusions.
Wow.
If you select an answer while you are in this recursive escalating state, you are committing an error of what the paper terms premature closure.
Premature closure. Because you aren't actually solving the problem. You just want the agonizing loop to stop.
Think about the mechanics of what you're doing. You are selecting a resolution from within the exact same constraint circuit that generated the instability in the first place. You haven't resolved the double bind. You've merely exhausted the system into picking a dominant, blunt force pathway.
Right.
Skipping to a cabin doesn't teach you how to navigate contradictory authority. Sending an impulsive breakup text doesn't resolve the communicative breakdown.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The resolution isn't corrective. It merely confirms the loop, ensuring the overarching pattern persists. What appears as profound clarity in a state of escalation is often only the tightening of the knot. It is a false resolution that will inevitably lead you right back to the same structural crisis, just in a different context.
Okay, so this sounds slightly terrifying.
I know it does.
If we cannot think our way out of the loop, because our thoughts are just repeating the same constrained guide,
Right.
and if our sudden moments of late-night clarity are actually just traps of premature closure that tighten the knot, how on earth do we fix the glitch? If I'm stuck in the double bind with the contradictory boss and the microphone is just screeching, am I just doomed to a life of positive feedback?
Not at all. But the solution requires a total shift in strategy. You have to stop trying to solve the content of the problem and address the structure of the system.
The structure.
Right. The intervention does not require silencing the system. It doesn't require eliminating the pattern we call the self. You don't have to destroy your ego or empty your mind entirely. What it requires is the restoration of flexibility.
Flexibility, as opposed to the rigid loop that just repeats itself.
Exactly. A flexible system can tolerate contradiction. It can receive opposing signals, absorb them, and reorganize itself without crashing.
But a rigid system...
A rigid system takes that same contradiction and amplifies it into disorder. So the entire goal of intervention is the prevention of rigidification. You must interrupt the recursive loop to reintroduce variability into the system.
How do we actually do that, though?
The text specifically outlines how to achieve this mechanically. It suggests altering your attention, changing your physiological state, or introducing novel input.
So what does this all mean? Let's connect this directly to your daily life, because this is the actionable part. If the goal is preventing rigidification and we need to change our physiological state or seek novel input, that means you literally have to force your biological hardware to process new sensory data.
Yes.
You have to flood the system so it's forced to drop the old cognitive loop.
Let's look at the neurological mechanism behind why that works. Your brain has a finite amount of processing power and bandwidth, right?
Right.
When you are stuck in a cognitive loop, that loop is hoarding all the electrical and chemical resources. To break the recursion, you have to demand the system process something entirely outside the loop, something so immediate that it just cannot be ignored.
Which explains so much about modern coping mechanisms. I mean, it explains why doing something aggressively physical actually works when you're spiraling.
It really does.
It's why jumping into a freezing cold shower can literally snap a person out of a panic attack. Your brain wants to keep looping about the contradictory boss or the embarrassing email, but suddenly your nervous system is flooded with intense somatic data. Your skin is screaming, "We are freezing!"
Right.
And the brain has to immediately divert processing power away from the abstract cognitive loop to deal with the immediate physical reality of the cold. The novel input overrides the loop.
The physiological shock stars the loop of the energy it needs to sustain the positive feedback. It is a forced reallocation of resources.
You see the same thing with going for a really intense, exhausting run, or like radically changing your environment by leaving the house and walking in a noisy, visually complex forest. You
Exactly.
aren't just distracting yourself in a frivolous, avoidant way. You are performing a hard systemic reset. You are actively feeding the system the variability it needs to access pathways that are not currently dominant. You're rebooting the machine.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this fundamentally changes what it means to understand a problem.
Oh, how so?
The ultimate takeaway from this cybernetic framing is that understanding does not require finding a new answer while you are in the crisis. In fact, searching for an answer during the crisis is exactly what causes premature closure.
Right, the trap.
Yes, understanding requires a change in the conditions under which answers are produced. You have to change the state of the machine first. You have to take the cold shower, go for the run, or disrupt the environment. Only then, with restored flexibility, can the system actually learn and generate a novel response to the double bind.
That is a total paradigm shift. I mean, it completely removes the shame of feeling stuck. So, just to recap the incredible journey we've just been on, our sense of identity is an emergent pattern, like a flock of birds held together by feedback.
Right.
And what we usually call a personal meltdown or a loss of self is actually just a cybernetic failure of that feedback. It's a double-bind incoherent information that causes a loop without correction.
Exactly.
That loop escalates into the deafening screech of positive feedback, which we experience as intense urgency. And the way out isn't to think harder or to engage in mental combat with your own thoughts or to make a drastic 3 a.m. decision. You just need to disrupt the rigid loop. You need to flood the system with novel input. You need a pulled shower for your cybernetic network.
It is mechanical, not moral. And that structural understanding gives you immense power over your own mind. You're no longer at the mercy of some mystical emotional fog. You are managing a system.
That's so empowering.
It is. But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the source material we explored today. If our self is indeed an emergent property, entirely maintained by the feedback loops we engage with, think about the digital algorithms and social media feeds you interact with every single day.
Oh, wow. The ultimate literal feedback loops.
Are those digital circuits providing the novel input and variability necessary for a flexible, healthy mind? Or are they perfectly intentionally engineered to act as double binds?
Oh, man.
Are they trapping you in automated, rigid loops of positive feedback, feeding you the repetition of dominance, and purposefully escalating your sense of urgency just to keep you clicking? Next time you feel that deep sense of mental urgency, that deafening internal screech telling you the world is ending, ask yourself, is this my actual identity speaking? Or is it just a glitch in the network?